And now, Deborah Kobylt Live.
Hi, everybody, and thank you for joining us today for Deborah Kobylt Live. I saw a wonderful documentary this past week, The Color of Medicine, and I'm honored to have the two co-directors of this film with me today, Joyce Fitzpatrick and Brian Shackelford. The Color of Medicine. And thank you very much for joining us. It's an honor.
Oh, thank you for having us.
You know, we spoke on the phone and I said I couldn't get this film out of my mind because I never knew about it. I never heard of this hospital or knew much about it until this film. And the way you wrote it and directed it was fascinating because you got people who were in the community there to talk about this hospital and what it meant to the Black community in this area. Can you tell us, where does it take place and what is this film about, The Color of Medicine, please?
Do you want me to start?
Sure, go ahead, Joyce, go ahead.
Well, thank you so much for having us on your show, first of all, Deborah.
Sure.
A great opportunity. The Color of Medicine, the story of Homer Phillips Hospital, takes place completely in the city of St. Louis, in North St. Louis, which is considered the Ville. That is the nickname of the community, but it is actually called Ellardsville, which was owned by a white entrepreneur. And he basically had all of this property. And so over time, it was sold to the community or to the city of St. Louis, which eventually was shortened to the Ville. And that is where this historic icon of medicine resides. The building is actually still there. Mm-hmm. And it is being utilized in a different capacity. But that building is what was the heart of that community called the Ville.
You know, what you did was you started this film and you talked to us about this gentleman, Homer G. Phillips. Mm-hmm. Who was he in the community there in St. Louis there? I didn't know of him, but he was a person, an attorney. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes.
And he was a high profile person. And why don't you tell us a little bit about what happened to him, Brian, if you want to go, and why this hospital ended up being named after him, if you will.
Well, with Homer G. And thank you so much for the compliment on knowing about Homer G. Phillips, because that was one of the most important things we wanted to have known in this documentary, because we didn't know too much about Homer G. Phillips. He was an activist, he was an attorney, and I'm trying to encapsulate it because the man did so many incredible things. But long story short, what he was able to do was to get a bill that had recently been established to build a new hospital, but he wanted this hospital to be built in the area of the Ville. So what he was able to do was actually, in garnering this, basically it was a new bill that was passed, but he was able to allocate those funds for for a hospital to be built in an all Black community. Now, mind you, from the bill being passed and for him getting this, making this be able to happen, it was still 10 years from groundbreaking of this hospital to when this hospital was open. So,
when did it open? It opened when?
1937.
1937.
Right. So he worked for 10 years from around 27 to 37 to get this to happen tirelessly in the Black community of the Ville there. And there was a lot of opposition, I know, but continue. I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
No. And the thing that makes him so important was that Homer G. Phillips was assassinated before this hospital. He never got to see all of his life's work come to fruition. He was, and there's so many backstories on what actually happened in the assassination, in his murder, but it was definitely tied to him being able to get the funds to get this hospital built in the Black community. I mean, literally, the way I like to see it is he pulled something over on them using his intelligence and using a system that they set up, but there was a back door that was open that nobody ever thought an intelligent Black man would step in, and using the laws that they set up, they could not deny this, they could only prolong it.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
You know, what really stuck in my mind was before this hospital was built, how so many Black citizens clearly were not treated as equal citizens. And very often when they got medical care in the local hospital, they were in the basement behind the boiler room. Can you explain that to us? Because that had my blood boiling. So why don't you tell me a little bit about the way many Black citizens were treated before this hospital was even was up and running?
Well, the hospital that you're referencing is called City Hospital Number 1. There is an actual name to that hospital. I can't recall it at the moment, but it is in the documentary. But that was the only hospital, and it was considered a city hospital for everyone. So there were Blacks and whites that were part of that hospital, but Blacks were condemned to the basement of the hospital to get treatment. And what prompted the bond that Brian was speaking of, which was a $3 million bond, that was given to Homer G. Phillips, or that he was able to get or allocate, was because one of the patients and one of the doctors, they were performing a procedure, and one of the doctors was electrocuted while trying to perform a procedure in the basement. So because of that, they kind of had to address it. And so part of that, what Brian was speaking on in regards to Homer G. Phillips taking that taking that bond and structuring it so that it could benefit the Black community, was President Theodore Roosevelt had created the WPA, which is the Workforce of America. And so there was all this money. We still operate under that system today, which is why you see bridges, hospitals, all these things. Even though it has been privatized to some extent in the past, that was some of the things that were allocated so that the United States could be what it is. All these different bridges and hospitals were built. So all Homer G. Phillips did was attached to that. And so they were allocated $3 million, which during that time, when you take $3 million, and by today's standards, it's not that much. But back then, that was huge to be able to get this hospital built for that money. And so that is how it started.
The doctors and nurses were African-American, weren't they?
Yes, they were all African-American up to the 1960s. And then from 1960 on until it closed in 1979, they were able to bring in other ethnicities. But initially, when the hospital opened in 1937, it was all African-American, from the staff, the administrative staff, all the way down to the janitors, to the cooks in the kitchen. Every single person that worked in that hospital was African-American.
What's amazing about this film is that you have those relatives who lived, either people who were there at the time, I mean, clearly not the ones who were around in the 1930s, really, but those who were around in later years, and their relatives. You had nurses, you had a group of nurses in particular. There was one scene, if you will, where many of the nurses were there speaking, because you have a lot of interviews in this documentary about what it was like to work there and how important it was for the residents of this community in the Ville, but not just the residents, but the doctors and the level of care and the nurses and it was the community. And even once there was a physician that attended a surgery, am I correct about this? And he was not Black, and he was, if you will, stunned and amazed at what he was learning from the African-American doctors. Is that right? Go ahead, Brian. I hear you going,
Right. Yeah, that was one of the famous stories told to us by Dr. Robinson, who the precipice of us telling this story, it was really brought to us by him and Rebecca, his daughter, who Joyce used to babysit. So there's a whole background story to how that came about. But the story you're referring to is, yes, the doctors were working and performing. They actually had to perform 2 surgeries at one time, because they were basically brought in to show what they could do. And they had one of these surgeries, you'd only perform one at a time. But again, to see what they could do, they were like, well, let's see if you can do both of these. And they performed both of the surgeries at such a fast speed, the physicians couldn't even hold themselves back. And they were like, oh my God, look at these little niggas go. I mean, those
were their exact words.
Those were their exact words. And we left that in the documentary. Just it's expressive of the time of, again, their fascination with seeing intelligent Black men and women doing something that was thought that they could only do. Because at that time, it was thought that Black men couldn't be doctors, women couldn't be nurses. We didn't have the intellectual makeup to even to treat our own. But yet they created a #1 trauma center that didn't treat their own, but treated a lot of the whites that were injured in the area as well. So they didn't only, even though it was all Black facility, they didn't only treat the blacks, because people came from different areas to get that treatment, because I think their trauma center was listed the #1 trauma center in the world at the time.
Yeah. At the time, it absolutely was, which is
yes.
phenomenal. Where did many of the doctors and nurses get their education from? These are a group of highly educated people, and you display that in your film because, again, this is a documentary style film where they're talking about their experiences, and they were just beautiful people. Where would many of them go and get their schooling? Do you know?
Well, a lot of the doctors went to HBCUs, which are historically Black universities. Meharry, Howard. There was Dr. Robinson himself, who Brian was referring to. He went to Indiana University, which is not a historic HBCU, but still, that's where he attended school. And so a lot of that's one of the reasons why we wanted the historically Black colleges to get behind the film, to at least acknowledge it, because a lot of the people that worked at Homer G. Phillips attended those universities. And in fact, Homer G. Phillips himself was a graduate of Howard University. Mm-hmm. So the fact that he had the wherewithal and the forethought to do what he did, that is amazing. And it just goes to show you how resourceful and unique that the African-American community can be when they're faced with all of these adversities. They still find a way. And that has just been historically our journey throughout life. It's like when one door closes, we find another one, or when they completely shut us out, we still persevere. And that's one of the things that I admired about all of the people in the film. I admired about the history. The people we were interviewing, and then plus the people who started the hospital. I mean, it took a lot of courage to do that, considering that, their lives could have been affected. Even Dr. Robinson had mentioned that there was a point where he was driving to work to do his medical training, and he was stopped by the police, which tells you this has been going on forever. Mm-hmm. And he said that when they pulled him out of the car, he kept saying, "I'm on my way to the hospital." And they go, "What are you going to do at the hospital? Who are you?" And he says, "I'm a doctor." And they didn't believe him. And he had to pull out his medical bag to show them. It's just so sad that he had to do that. But those are the adversities that African Americans had to go through during that time. And
my son is fairly young, and he got pulled over by the cops not too long ago. And the guy asked him to come out, and he told me when he called me, he was scared as heck because he's, was a young driver. And he said to me, "I wondered at that moment what would have happened if I were African American." He said, "I really feel for people who get pulled out because I probably got very different treatment because I wasn't." And that bothered him a lot. Because this cop is a little rough, you know what I mean? And he could just tell. My kid's, pretty squeaky clean, but he could just tell. And that really bothered him to this day. Here we are in 2020, and that this kind of stuff is going on. We all know that. Look what's happened this year, for goodness sakes.
Yes.
So it's still happening, but look what they proved with the education. What still sticks with me is the community there. I mean, the lives of the doctors, the patients, the firsthand account of the training that went on just spoke everything. And how, why don't you talk to me a little bit about that, Brian, about the training and how this brought everybody together, the little kids, the grandmas. It was just the nucleus, right?
Definitely. I think one of the people we interviewed, author John Wright, said it best. This area, the people became the best because they had to become the best. There was nothing else to rely on. And it's funny when you look at the way the system was set up in the redlining, and basically when a society is cut off from the rest of society, that society will crumble or it will build within itself. And that's
built.
And that's exactly what happened. It hit me so much to hear. I think it was Mario Page, his father, spoke and was saying that, speaking of the importance of having somebody teach you that looks like you, that came from where you came from, it makes a big difference. And actually, I mirror that moment with when we screened at Washington University, one of the students coming up to us after the screening, crying and thanking us for putting out a film like this, because he was saying he's the only Black student in all of his classes. He's away from home. He's homesick, and I can relate to nobody here. Nobody can relate to what I'm going through. But when I saw that film, it reminded me what I was doing this for, And if they can go through what they went through, what I'm going through is nothing. And that's that's the great thing about this film. It serves as a building block. It reminds us of the shoulders that we're standing on to do the things that we can do today.
Oh yeah, very well put. I mean, as Joyce said, this film is the hidden figures of medicine, right?
Yes,
definitely.
It's the hidden figures of medicine. So let's talk about what happened when it was shut down. Was it 1979? Who shut it down and why? This is a thriving hospital that went through decades of educating people, treating people. By the way, how many patients went through there on a given year?
Cool.
Well, depending upon, when people talk about hospitals and the number of beds, I mean, it was a huge facility.
Yeah, it was huge.
I really don't know approximately, but I'm sure hundreds, if not thousands of people, because if you just look at the demographic of that area, you would probably have to do a consensus to see how many lived in that community. And then on top of that community, like Brian stated, other people came into the community to get service as well. So it was huge, because I think if you probably remember, Deborah, in the movie, there's a scene that's black and white footage that was given to us by one of the doctors who was one of the superintendents. His daughter, McClellan, gave us that footage, which we're so grateful for. And she's acknowledged as well in the film. But if you see that scene, it's black and white film footage and people are just droves. It almost looks like a concert. That just shows
it did.
Yeah,
it was just a happy place to go get your treatment. I mean, honestly,
right.
The hospitals that we have today, you don't see that type of flooding of people coming in and out like that. I mean, it just goes to show you how appreciative they were and how grateful they were in that community to have that hospital.
It's one word. It's community. It's really just that, because you might not know who you're treating, but you might know their uncle. That's part of community, and you're treating each other. That's what I loved about this film. Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, it's definitely, that footage showed how the hospital was the heartbeat of the community. Because another one of the people we interviewed, it was Ron Gregory's brother, was stating that as a kid, you see professionals on a daily basis, going to work, serving the community. So it gave you something to strive for as a kid, realizing that, wow, I don't need to leave my community. Everything I need is right here. And this is who I can become. This is who I can do. I can be this doctor. I can be this store owner. It was all right there. Again, a community that was cut off to starve and die thrived and produced the #1 hospital and some of the top medical physicians, doctors, and nurses in the area. I mean, people came there to get their training.
Yeah.
Right. I'm sorry, Deborah, I wanted to let Brian know. Ron, he was referring to Ron Gregory, who is actually Dick Gregory's brother.
That's what I'm sorry.
Yeah, Dick Gregory is the famous African-American comedian who was very militant. And people know him, and they were both born there in the Ville. And we were so fortunate to get Ron, his brother, on our show. And actually, in the film, when we were interviewing him, Dick Gregory passed away the very day that they closed Homer G. Phillips Hospital. He died that next day, which was August 19th. Because we had interviewed him, I think, on the 18th, which was really spooky.
Yeah.
Wow.
But the fact that he died the day, of the closing. But the brother, Ron Gregory, when we were trying to get interviews, again, because my maiden name is Fitzpatrick, I kept reaching out to him, and he was like, I don't really want to talk. It was interesting. A lot of the people we met, it's not that they were being racist or anything. They just didn't feel that if they spoke to a white journalist that they could be comfortable enough to get their information out. So when I reached out to them, they were saying, no, I don't want to talk to you. But then once he found out that I was Black, then he said, okay, I'll talk to you because you can understand my experience.
Right.
And
you were emailing them with your photo attached, right?
Yeah.
It's like, here I am.
No one does, right?
Miss Fitzpatrick, and here's what I really look like, okay?
Exactly.
I'm safe to talk to. No, but I get it. I mean, I actually really get it, because they're probably going to think, now, what does this Fitzpatrick know anything about what I've been through? But I understand that. That. So let's go back to 1979, please, because the closing of this hospital upset me also greatly. Really, I'm telling you, for like 3-4 nights in a row, you know how you wake up and you're dreaming about something? I was thinking about all the different stories and scenarios. This is how much your documentary affected me. I felt these people deeply.
Thank you.
I did. So let's talk about that closing. Why? How did that happen? Briefly, if you don't mind.
And that's why with Brian, and we both can chime in together. That's why all of the emotions that you see in the film, because that was the most traumatic point of that film, because these people loved this hospital because it meant so much to them. And the fact that the government came in, or the city, they cut off their mode of communication first so that they couldn't call one another to do protests like they do now. So then after they did that, then they just came in and just started removing the patients. But it was very traumatic for everyone. And people to this day, they're still traumatized. And actually, Mr. Walia Musa, who we interviewed, you see he got emotional in the film. He told us because that reason he was so emotional was because he had not set foot in that hospital since the day it closed. That was in 1979, and we interviewed him in 2017. He said, I never set foot back in that hospital because it was so painful with all of the protests and everything we went through to try to keep it open. And for what? Why would they try to do that much to close a hospital? It's not like it was something that was a negative thing in the community. And that's what hurt so bad.
We talked about that, right? It's happened here in Los Angeles, right? Yeah. What was the name of the hospital in downtown? It's happened there too.
Yes.
I mean, it's obvious what happened there, and we can't let that happen again. And that's why this film is so important, that this can't happen again. Let's talk about modern day now. Let's talk about what's been happening with the protests and why, and how relevant this film is, because if we don't tell stories like this is just going to keep happening. Exactly. And we have to squash those people who are doing that stuff. You know what I mean? The bad cops, the bad politicians. There's plenty of decent ones, but the ones who are making those kind of decisions are messing it up for everybody else. And big communities of people who are doing good things. What can we do? What can we do?
I think, for one, as you stated earlier about community, that was one of the things that I felt like the words that are key to me is community is important, medical excellence is important, family is important, because you do feel like you're in a big family. Of course, trying to just deal with accessibility. That is huge. And the misconceptions that the medical professionals have of African Americans when it comes to pain and things like that. It's like with the COVID-19, our community has been suffering, or one of the most biggest minorities that have suffered from COVID-19, because they just don't care.
This upsets me when I hear, oh, well, it's happening to the elderly and people of various colors. I'm like, and that's okay. I mean, are you kidding me? I don't get that line of thinking. I don't. And I'm hoping most people don't get that line of thinking, and excuse me. So that's why we must keep these stories alive and never let that happen again.
Definitely.
Go ahead, Brian. I think
I was going to say, I think two things that we need to do are, one, what we're doing now is starting the conversation. There's a lot of very difficult conversations that we have to have. And I heard it said best, where a lot of times we want to stand up and say something. Sometimes we need to sit down and listen, because you really need to hear where that other side is coming from. Don't try to put yourself in their shoes. Don't try to anticipate. Just listen. The next thing I think we need to do, and I think we talked about this a little over the weekend, is I think there needs to be a self-accountability. Because if we are accountable for what we're doing, it doesn't matter what other people think about what we're doing. But again, it's a self-accountability where we are linking and working together to move everything forward, not just this agenda, everything has to move forward. But there's an accountability within ourselves to make sure that that happens. And that's an accountability in people of color, different genders. It's a self-accountability. It's almost like what's happening now with the mask. I don't need the CDC to tell me I need to wear a mask. I need to my accountability to go on and put one on. It's that we don't need people to tell us what to do. We know what needs to be done. We just need to start acting on it and doing it together and moving everything forward.
You know what I never understand? What's the problem? I mean, because if everybody just sort of kind of does the right thing and doesn't upset other people, it's better for everybody else. Who wants to live under this kind of stress? Let people get educated and have their hospital. Let them do what it is. I don't even understand the problem. I actually think it's easier to do it that way, including the whole mask argument. It's like, just wear it. Hey, I don't like it either any more than anybody else does. You think I want to suffocate half the time going out the door, but I have to do it. I don't want to get it and I don't want to give it. And it's the same with something like this. Go ahead, Joyce. I could tell you were going to say something.
Oh no, and you hit the nail on the head. I mean, even like with the Nike commercial, just do it. It's like people love that, you know. But what I don't understand, and thank you so much again for giving us a forum to talk about this important documentary, because I have been, you know, we've had major success with it, thank goodness, but
Good.
I don't understand a lot of journalists and a lot of African-American journalists, and I'm sorry, I'm going to call them out. I'm not going to say their names, but I have sent, you know, information. Our PR people have sent them information. And unless you're a superstar attached or talking about it, they're just ignoring this. And it's just sad because, you know, I don't understand that. And the African-American community is doing that. And I don't understand why these journalists are not jumping on this story.
If they get the opportunity to see it, they'll jump right on it because it's a very moving film. These are real people talking about their experiences. And I can't, as I said, it's affected me greatly. So tell me a little bit about the success that you've had with the film, with getting it out there. And what's the next step? Where do you want to see this going?
Well, we've been very successful. It's won 5 Best Documentary Awards around the world. It has screened in over, I don't know how many screenings, probably 50 or 60 screenings nationwide. It's been at Princeton University. It's had major success. And now it is available on all streaming formats everywhere, internationally and nationally. And it is also available on DVD. So you can find it on Amazon Prime, iTunes. If people just Google it, it'll tell you exactly where it is located. We're so happy about that because Vision Films was kind enough to give us distribution, and they have been phenomenal getting our film out there. And we hope that the community will get a chance to see, like you said, knowledge is power. So if they get a chance to see this documentary, then maybe more people will want it in their forums. I mean, we've been approached by PBS, we've been approached by the public school systems, and we hope to work with those entities as well. But right now it's available for everyone to see so they can make that judgment call.
Beautiful. Brian?
Yeah. And I was going to say, again, a major thank you to Vision Films, but I was just listening to Joyce and it was reminding me of the journey that we've been on with this film, because for it to have distribution now, we shot and completed this film over 3 years ago and then took it on the film festival tour. And we got a lot of people that were interested. It's winning film festivals, but still film festivals used to be about going to a film festival and getting a distribution deal. That is not the case anymore, only with a very few limited film festivals. So everything that we've done and been pushing this, it's just been a passion project, the love that we've had in this story to get this out. We didn't take salaries. We didn't take any fee. We just wanted to get, once we got on board to tell this story, it was about telling this story the best way we possibly could. And I just had to say one thing when you were talking about the ending. That was the hardest part of this film to cut because it was so emotional. And we had photos that we had never seen before that hadn't been released. Actually, I think it was the Mercantile that gave us these photos that hadn't been
St. Louis Mercantile
anywhere. So putting that together, those images over those stories, it broke me down night after night that what had happened. It's almost like you spent all this time. I'm told I can't have anything, but then I work my butt off and I build it myself into something that's beautiful. And then you come and tear it down.
And take it away.
It's that sandcastle that you've been working on all day that wave comes in and washes out. But that wave has a name, though.
Tell me what's going on now with that building. It's a massive structure. I know one time it was a senior center, and now what's going on there? And what's the community like there now, since it was torn down nearly, 40 years ago, right?
Well, the building is still intact. So
yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
And is it being used for anything, or it's just there?
Yeah, it's technically still a senior living facility. It's actually very beautiful, Deborah. If you ever get a chance when we can all travel again, if you get a chance, the community around it is a little impoverished, but the building stands out like a sore thumb. It's completely
beautiful.
protected. It's beautiful. And when you walk in, if any of your audience gets an opportunity to go onto our website, thecolormedicine.com, there's videos on there of us taking a tour of the facility. It's absolutely beautiful. And when you walk in, the stairs that are there, those are the stairs that you actually took to go up to the hospital. I don't know how those engineers did it, but they were able
beautiful.
to encapsulate. Yeah.
It reminded me of the Titanic. Remember, like those grand stairs? Right? Am I right about
Absolutely.
that? It's like you only goes two ways, I think, in the hospital. But it was very grand. I felt like I was entering a ballroom. I mean, it was really quite stunning. I mean, in all ways. So, wow. So what are you guys working on next? Go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, no, I would say it's still operational now. And if people want to take tours, they can go there. There's an organization that also helped with the film called For the Ville. They can find them on social media. It's the number 4 and then For the Ville. And they give weekly tours, probably daily.
Oh, that's cool.
Tours. Yes. Of the facility. There's North Side Housing that is building homes in that area. I mean, there's so many organizations that we have to thank. The Urban League, everybody pitched in to get this film done. And as Brian had said, we didn't get a salary at all. All the monies that we were able to get through crowdsource funding and through our premieres or screenings have all gone back into the film. We have not.
Passion project, an important project, really important.
But we're still excited, as you said, about the new thing we're doing, because you wanted us to mention that. Brian, you want to talk?
Yeah, what's it called? The Hidden Orchard Mystery or something? Yes. Tell me about that.
Our new film is Hidden Orchard Mysteries. It's our spin on what I call our spin on Nancy Drew, where you have two girls of color that are solving the crimes in their neighborhood. It was a blast to film in Atlanta. And they really opened their doors to us, and the response that we've gotten behind this film has been incredible. It's actually, for me, what I call, because Joyce was a very big fan of Nancy Drew. I came from Encyclopedia Brown, so we kind of collided the two ideas, and really just it's kind of a break from everything that's going on right now, because in watching the film back, it reminded me of that time where anything was possible. A sense of adventure. You went out, played cowboys and Indians, and also reminded me a time of community where, everybody, if an adult said something to you in your neighborhood, it didn't matter if they were your parent or not. You did what they said because that was
absolutely out of respect.
Yeah,
you don't even have to agree with the person. Just a little out of respect. You don't talk back or whatever. I'm with you. Well, but I love this idea of two young girls, African American girls, going on an adventure and solving something. I think that's brilliant. I love it. So where are you in the process, and when could we see this?
Actually, for that film, Deborah, it's an African American girl and also an Asian girl who is Asian and Italian.
Yes.
So, but the film is already done and it's already out streaming as well. And it's also tomorrow. And thank you so much for having us on today, because tomorrow it's actually going to be on DVD. But right now it's worldwide. It was in the virtual Cannes Film Festival. And the reason people love it so much is because of what you stated. It's diverse. The whole community is diverse. It's not just an African American community. It has all of these really great, fun characters, and everybody's enjoying it. And a note on that: Hidden Orchard is actually my hometown. I mean, my neighborhood that I grew up in. So we named it after that. So,
new. Wait, where is that? Hidden Orchard in
Indiana, called Hidden Orchard. It's an actual street called Hidden Orchard.
That's cool. I always love to know the backstory to these things. There's always some little kernel of something where somebody came from. I love that.
Right.
Definitely.
Any parting words from both of you? Because I wish I had another hour, but I don't have any more time.
No, just thank you for allowing us again. Things like this, starting the conversation. We thank you so much. Thank you for even letting us know like the impact that this documentary had on you, because again, it was a passion project. And a special thank you to Vision Films for picking up the documentary, picking up Hidden Orchard, and willing to work with us in the future. So
look, you're doing great work. That's why. Great work for all people. Okay. And you're shining a spotlight on a period in time that many of us didn't know about. And I very much enjoyed hearing the stories from the people that were directly there. And they were smart, they were educated, they were funny, they were community, great people. I wish they were my neighbors. Yes. I will tell you that. That's one thing I thought, gosh, I want neighbors like this, instead of hiding behind their door or whatever, just come on out. That's how I grew up in Jersey. Everybody's out on the street, and You don't have that
Exactly.
as much anymore, talking as
Mhm.
much. So thank you for sharing.
It was an honor to interview those people because those are truly our superheroes. We don't realize it, but everything that we're doing is because of the steps that they took back then. So I just bow to them and say thank you, and thank you for allowing us to tell that story, because that was
it was my honor. Believe me, I really appreciate you both coming on. Maybe we'll have you back on again. Maybe, and we'll talk about Hidden Orchard, because that would be fun, and maybe focus on that, because that sounds like a lot of fun. I almost wish I was a kid and I was in that. You know what I mean? Because like I kind of thought like that as a kid. I'd be off biking and going somewhere in the woods and looking for something that wasn't there. Just that whole sense of adventure. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And it's bringing it out. So you guys make films that I seem to be very interested in. So
awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you so
both
much
of you.
Thank you. It's a wonderful show. It's great that you really get it. You know, and a lot of journalists don't get it, and I really appreciate that. And thank you so much.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. Joyce Marie Fitzpatrick, Brian Shackelford. Look them both up. Brian's got kind of an interesting background in his filmmaking. I'm just gonna. Oh my gosh, I wish I had more time to talk about it, but look him up. Brian, if that gets people to tease it a little bit, then maybe they'll look you up a little bit. Very interesting background, very diverse. Again, The Color of Medicine, people, look it up. It's streaming everywhere, and it's well worth your time. It's a wonderful documentary, and I'd love to hear about it if you do that. So please. And thanks, everybody, for joining us. Please look them up. Look up their new film, this previous film, just read about the kind of work that they're doing. It's important, really, for all of us and all of our communities. I appreciate everybody being here and joining us on Deborah Kobylt Live. You can find us Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spreaker, iHeart, just you name it, you'll find us. And I want to again just repeat that I'm honored that I was nominated for 6 awards from the Los Angeles Press Club, including Journalist of the Year. So fingers crossed that I'm really, truly honored to be nominated. And it's because of stories like yourselves, really, where I can tell. So I'm happy to be doing that. So thanks, everybody, for joining us. Thank you very much. I'm excited about it.